and welcome to the first webinar in our series, Restoring Country, exploring Indigenous-led participation in mine closure and environmental services. I will begin by acknowledging the Whadjuk Noongar and the Turrbal traditional owners and their custodianships of the land in which our team are meeting today and the traditional owners of the lands in which you are joining us. On behalf of our team, I pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australia and globally. I'm Caroline Williams, Yamatji woman from the Mid-West Murchison and Gascoyne region. I have a background in Aboriginal economic development, education and health. My role at the CRC Time is Engagement Manager First Nations, and I'll be the moderator today. Just to note that we're recording this webinar and we'll be uploading the video to YouTube. We want this series to remain available as a knowledge resource into the future. This webinar series is a joint initiative of CRC Time and the Centre for Social Responsibility in Mining, or CSRM. Roger Barnes and Julia Keenan are our partners from CSRM. Give us a wave to let us know who you are. Great. So CSRM is part of the Sustainable Minerals Institute at the University of Queensland. Roger and Julia are part of a team of around 30 researchers at the centre who are dedicated to examining social and community issues related to resource extraction. Briefly, CRC Time is a partnership of more than 70 collaborating organisations from research, industry, government, community and suppliers, whose aim is to work together to deliver a bold vision to unite Australia's regions in the development and delivery of economic, social and environmentally resilient post-mining futures. A part of this project planning is another CRC Time staff member I'd like to mention who was working behind the scenes, Ben Hamilton. Thank you for helping to help make this happen. Okay, so to give a bit of background context, CRC Time and CSRM have both been involved in a range of research initiatives looking at mine closure and in particular Indigenous people's perspectives. We've encountered a lot of different organisations with experience in this space with a desire to find opportunities for Indigenous participation. The aim of the Restoring Country series is to provide an open and constructive space for dialogue among a range of different stakeholders so that we can assist in a shared understanding over 5 webinars to understand the complex needs and challenges as operations close and the scale and scope of opportunities these present for Indigenous groups. Indigenous and industry views on the possibilities and challenges for participation, including what is working well and ways to improve partnerships and outcomes through closure. Various modes of Indigenous stewardship on mine sites, such as company-hosted Indigenous teams, contracted fee for service through traditional owner organisations and ranger programs. To create an awareness of also the training and education landscape, and finally, the important role of women in environmental stewardship. On this note, although we don't have Indigenous women on the panel today, we see them working heavily on the ground and are an important voice to the conversation and will be involved in following webinars. So this webinar starts the series by hearing about research on opportunities in closure and environmental services in the mining industry. Then hear from leaders in Indigenous businesses and other organisations to understand perspectives and to set the scene for the next webinars. We've got some excellent panellists lined up to dive deeper into the different perspectives. So a little bit of housekeeping. First, we ask you to be considerate of others by trying to keep your questions on topic and concise as possible. These will be done at the end. Feel free to share comments or references and your questions in the chat as we go. You'll have that opportunity to ask the panel the questions at the end. And for your information, we're also producing a summary report at the completion of the series to capture key points, issues for further discussion and lessons learnt. Okay, so further to the agenda today, we'll begin with an industry overview, as well as a presentation from CSIRO discussing the range of potential opportunities for Indigenous businesses in environmental services, progressive rehabilitation, mine closure transitions, and post-mining land use. Following this, We'll hear responses from our esteemed panelists and then open the floor for questions from the audience for the last 20 minutes or so, followed by a short summary, thank yous, and what is next by Roger Bunce. So in the panel session, we'll be asking the speakers to consider the role of Indigenous groups and businesses in enabling Indigenous-led participation in restoring country, synergies and disconnects with Indigenous Ranger programs and other challenges within the sector, enablers and barriers for traditional owner groups in identifying opportunities and enabling engaging with industry. Our panelist today is Leslie Schultz. Leslie is a Naju traditional custodian and native title holder. He leads the Naju Ranger program and setting up of traditional fire programs. Leslie has a wealth of knowledge regarding conservation and land management and will bring his views on ranger engagement to the discussion. Leslie might have a little bit of trouble connecting with us today, so we may need to phone him through. John Briggs, Yorta Man and CEO of and one of the founders of Intract, the successful Indigenous construction company. John is one of the CRC Times First Nations advisory team members as well. He brings the engagement and operations perspectives to the discussion today. Derek Flucker and Jai Lawton from AMI, Aboriginal Enterprises in Mining, Energy and Exploration. Derek is from Stradbroke, Min Jabbar, and is a Quandamuka man. He is the chairperson of AMI, managing director of RYB projects and Manager projects. Derek has broad experience managing contracting companies in the resource sector and has a good understanding of the local challenges. Jai is a Bajara man and inaugural CEO of AMI. Jai is a former CEO of AAA. He brings a wealth of experience in Indigenous business knowledge. Firstly, we'll have two short presentations to kick off the discussion. The first is from our CRC Time in External Relations and Impact Director, Jillian Durso. Jillian is an engagement policy and corporate affairs professional with more than 15 years experience of bringing diverse stakeholders together to build shared understanding and achieve common goals. Then following from Jillian is Dominic Banfield for a short presentation on the CRC Time project 3.17, Enabling Mine Closure and Transitions, Opportunities for Australian Industry Report. So Dominic is a senior manager in CSIRO Futures, the strategic and economic advisory arm of Australia's National Science Agency. He has led the successful delivery of major industry development roadmaps for technologies. So over to Jillian.
Thanks so much, Caroline, and thank you to everyone on the call. I'm so grateful to be joining you today from Peramunk and Ghana country of the Adelaide Hills, and I'd also like to join in paying my respect to elders past, present and emerging. When I feel incredibly privileged to have the role that I do with the potential to really help as a collective with everyone on the call and beyond, to really think differently and to help change what happens when mining ends. And I just wanted to acknowledge Ben, Caroline, Roger and Julia for their work on this series. We thought it might be just useful before we move into Dominic's presentation, just to highlight a couple of quick points that we really think about as an organisation, and we've heard come up quite a lot in the engagements that have been done over the 4 years of our organisational life. What we hear, and this is what we hear and what we're working collectively to try to resolve, is that there's few examples of mines closing well compared to the scale of industry. There's a lot of focus on First Nations rights, interest and aspirations, and I know that that's not always the case, and there needs to be more, but this usually occurs at the development and approval stage, and this can be less focus, there's often less or limited focus on agreement implementation or what occurs at the end of mine life. One of the big messages that we've heard and what we're covering is the term unclosure centres the mining activity rather than the communities and lands on which the mining occurs. And we know that traditional owners have been there for time immemorial and continue to hold the land forever into the future. that changes to operations over mine life can change what is possible when mining ends. So what was a potential post-mining land use at the start may not be possible over time. We need to be clear and upfront about where those decision points are. There's a lot of inherent value in the assets and infrastructure associated with mining. We've all seen the roads and the airports and the buildings and whatnot. But often the opportunities to explore what alternate uses those assets can be useful, they occur too late without enough time or resources to think about what alternate markets or alternate purposes, which means that that inherent value can be lost if traditional owners and others would like to use it for an alternate purpose. And the cultural and social dimensions are often absent from discussions about mine closure and transition. I wanted to acknowledge the work from the Centre for Social Responsibility in Mining, Social Aspects of Mine Closure Consortium, that really helped put the social aspects on the forefront, but we know there's a lot more to do, and we hear a lot about the importance, and part of this series is making sure the cultural dimensions are considered as well. Caroline, could I go to the next slide briefly, please? So we're working as an organisation and just setting the context for Dominic's report, which he undertook last year, and just acknowledging John, who was on the steering committee for that, is we're working to change how mine closure and post-mine transitions are understood. Until recently, there was really limited discussion about what a positive post-mine transition was. It was focused on the end of mining. We're trying to transform how we work with First Nations and communities about the end of life and at the end of mine life. How we bring together the cultural, social, environmental, economic and governance dimensions. We all know there's been a lot of focus on from industry stable and self-sustaining in terms of land stability, but we need to think beyond that to the people and community aspects as well. Moving from thinking from a site to regional scale, people in the environment don't think from a site perspective, they think in an ecosystem, and we need to shift that thinking. And finally, and before we move on to Dominic, seeing the costs of closure, they're often seen as a liability. How about if we change that vision to seeing them as an opportunity for business and community development and opportunity? So with that, I'll pass on to Dominic. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jillian. I'd like to also echo the acknowledgement of country earlier and acknowledge the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation as a traditional custodians of the land where I live and work. And I'd like to extend the respect to all of our panel members today. All right, as mentioned, I work for CSIRO in a team called CSIRO Futures. That team is a consultancy that sits within the National Science Agency, focused on developing strategies at the intersection of emerging technologies and national challenges. And we work with a range of government and business clients more often than not, but also collaborate with other research organisations such as the CRC Time and universities. I'd like to thank all of our project partners who supported this work. Fortescue and the Minerals Research Institute of Western Australia contributed cash support for the project, which enabled it to succeed, and the other partners contributed either cash or in-kind support. I'd particularly like to thank John Briggs, who is on our panel today, who's a member of our steering committee and is also a member of the CRC Times First Nations Advisory Team. I'd also like to thank the rest of the CRC Time, including and probably especially Jillian for their support during the project, which would not have been as great a success as it was without their hard work. So before I get started about what our project was and what it found out, I'd like to just get a few definitions clear in the way that we use them. The mining services and the mine closure and transition space is constantly evolving in practice and in terminology. So for this project, we set some clear definitions. First of all, we adopted the term mine closure and transitions to describe the broad range of strategies, activities that relate to the completion of mining activities and the establishment of post-closure land uses. And we developed the term mine closure solutions and mine closure solutions providers to describe the equipment, technology and services that support and enable those mine closures and transitions, and to describe the companies that provide those solutions. We did this because we found out early in the project that the METS term was not supported by quite a few of the industries that act as mine closure solutions providers, because they work across a range of industries. So the project was initially conceived of by the CRC time, who approached us to design a scope for the project with input from a broad range of stakeholders back in, I think, mid-2023. Its core objectives were to identify growth opportunities for mine closure solutions providers and to promote industry development and export opportunities in that sector. To help reframe, as Jillian mentioned, the opportunities that these closures and transitions create, as well as the liabilities, to help refocus our mindsets towards these challenges. That being said, we wanted to ensure that all of the opportunities and actions we identified were aligned to industry needs, so we commenced the project by exploring the mine closure challenges faced by experienced mine closure practitioners. We then used desktop research, further consultations, and a few targeted workshops to confirm these challenges and define opportunities for the providers to address them. We also identify a range of Australian mine closure services providers that are already addressing the identified challenges throughout the report, and these include a range of Indigenous businesses. Finally, we used further consultations and another workshop to explore potential enabling actions to address the barriers that could support the growth of the industry. I won't discuss those actions today, but encourage you to read the report following this webinar. So as we all know, successful closure of Australia's mines is an expensive challenge, but also an opportunity for the development of a skilled industry of mine closure solutions providers. Our analysis identified around 240 Australian mines that are projected to close in Australia within the next 20 years. These insights are based on analysis of a global market intelligence database, and we note that expected mine closure dates regularly change, so this number is also subject to change. By applying really high-level conservative assumptions developed in consultation with industry experts, we estimate that the annual expenditure on mine rehabilitation and closure activities related to these mines alone is likely to exceed around $4 billion each year. However, we do note that there are uncertainties and data quality issues that can affect the accuracy of these estimates. However, with increasing demand for many minerals, over 2,000 active mines in Australia, and estimates of tens of thousands of unrehabilitated mine sites, the demand for mine closure solutions is clear and will certainly continue. These closures will create a need for innovative mine closure solutions that mitigate social, cultural, environmental, and economic risks and reduce the cost of rehabilitation and other activities. Overall, this presents an opportunity for the development of a skilled ecosystem of mine closure solutions providers that improve the economic, social, and environmental outcomes of mine closure and transitions. Our analysis identified 4 high-level themes of challenges and opportunities that can be addressed by mine closure solutions, and these are all explored in our report. First of all, we acknowledge that mine closure is not just a technical challenge, it's really a social challenge. And so we start off our report by discussing the engagement and partnership solutions that are required to optimize mine closure outcomes through engagement with diverse stakeholders. Secondly, we identified that optimizing mine waste management by applying waste hierarchy principles can reduce waste, increase resource recovery, and reduce the cost of mine rehabilitation. Thirdly, innovative mine closure solutions are required to increase the performance of traditional mine rehabilitation activities, creating efficiencies and again reducing costs. And as Jillian mentioned, for many sites, traditional rehabilitation activities are not the best solution, and other solutions needed to enable land use transitions that optimize outcomes for mining communities and other stakeholders. Across these 4 themes, we identified about 20 individual opportunities for businesses to solve the industry's mine closure challenges and highlighted whether its work is being done. The report also recognises that mine closure can provide business and employment opportunities for Indigenous peoples and organisations across the entire span of these challenges. We also discussed how Indigenous-led businesses may be able to add unique value in particular areas such as engagement and partnerships, rehabilitation, and land use transitions. I'm going to keep it really short and sweet today because I've got a cold and I'm surviving on cold and flu tablets alone. But I'd really like to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak today. So thank you, Roger, Julia, and Carolyn for allowing me to speak. and thanks to the CRC more broadly. I really look forward to hearing the panelists' reflections on these unique opportunities and challenges that they see in the mine closure and post-closure transformations. Thanks very much.
And thank you to Jillian and Dominic. Just going to share back to the main slide for our questions to the panelists. Okay, so this question, think about what do you think are some of the research findings, and discuss two main things that stand out from the research findings. In terms of awareness, is this what you're finding on the ground? And do you think industry is ready for these partnership opportunities, or what needs to change? So maybe we'll start with John, and then Jai, Les, and Derek.
Yeah, hi all. Yeah, no, I don't think the industry's quite. This is a stepping stone to industry to educate them on what it is this whole thing means, and it's going to CRC time. And I guess it's a matter of getting that out there, this information, and tuned in today, so hopefully the word spreads and people think about and read these documents to look.
Thanks, John. And Jai.
Yeah, look, thanks for the opportunity as well. I am quite new to the sector. I've worked, been a part of AAMI for a number of years now, from a distance. But I think the first thing that stands out for me is that probably the oversight from a sector point of view, that the mine closure process, bit of an afterthought when you look at the findings of the research, and it probably needs to be at the forefront in terms of the earlier phases from exploration to extraction. It needs to be part of that process, and I think from an Indigenous point of view, it shouldn't be. It should go beyond engagement. I think we've proved through 60,000+ years that we are capable and have sustained and managed country in a sustainable way, and we should be involved at every point of the process, from traditional owners right through to the procurement of services to help out this space. But I think the other key finding that I don't think is on the ground is having the visibility of how much of that market share or the market size of mine closure. When you talk about the estimated numbers there of $4 billion per year, I don't think that's well known. So I think making that well known, and then understanding what opportunities that provides for Indigenous businesses to procure, to be part of that mine closure service solution offering is the work to be done.
Great response. That will lead to Les now.
Yeah, hello. Mine closure, I sort of see it as, oh, hang on, something's happening here. Can you still hear me?
We can still hear you.
Okay. What I do know is there hasn't been enough mine closure partnerships with Indigenous. That's evident on the ground, where you see a lot of open mine shafts and an ugly sight throughout the landscape. I come from a town called Norseman in Western Australia, and it had the longest running mine in Australia. So I grew up hearing the crusher every morning, every night. And I also grew up hearing the trains, trucks. It's a scar that's in my mind that's permanent. I still hear the crusher, even though I'm in Sydney. I still hear the crusher. And I think about all the on-country damage that's happened while that crusher is going, crushing rocks. We We have dangerous sites where we don't take our children because there are open mine sites in our country. So what we're talking about in relation to mine site cleanup should have been in place years ago. Animals are dying in those open mine shafts. I don't take our children around those areas that hasn't been rehabilitated. Mining industry makes a lot of money, extremely lot of money. Think about the amount of gold that's come out of the Central Norseman Gold Corporation mines in Norseman, and very little has ever came back to the First Nations of the land. So we need to, think through it a lot more better than the past, how we can do it better. It's coming a time, and mining industry has never done the Indigenous population any good. It needs to pull its socks up. And right now, we've got a renewable industry that's coming. And the mining area is fading, I guess. Still there. Still a lot of rehabilitation to be done. Mine cleanup. It'd be good if, the industry, mining, see, the Department of Mines should be at this conversation too, because they're managing all those mines at an administrative point of view anyway, and yet they've taken their hands of responsibility off restoring these landscapes. So the Department of Mines, they have to put their hand to the plough on this one.
Thank you, Les, for sharing your story. I really appreciate that. We'll now head to Derek.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this session today. Probably the key thing I want to state from the outset is that the big thing that we do have is that Aboriginal people are generally the neighbours to a lot of these projects, and there's a lot of these people living in third world conditions, as I experienced in many of my years working in these remote areas, and we're still in a position where there has been some gains, but there's still a lot of people living in fairly ordinary conditions. And we talk about mine closure, we're talking about one part of the project. I want to see, as a person who's involved in the industry, that we don't talk about the end of the project. We're talking about the beginning to the end. So there's this word called the cradle to grave. That's what I want to see. I want to see that these opportunities start at the beginning of the project, not just let's think about what's happening at the end. And some of these companies that are there, some of these economic development opportunities could extend and can extend through to the end. And I probably am, over the years, continually heard the industry talk about, Aboriginal people will get that part of the project, but they actually forget about what's going on right now. And they get to the end and they go, they're not really ready for that. They're not up for that, because there's no work that's been done between getting to that point. So let's move from the talk. Let's move from us saying they should be getting it because they're the traditional owners. They're the people going to be there forever. They were there forever before that. But let's start really making some gains about thinking about this from the beginning to the end, and making some real gains in terms of opportunities right now. There's a lot of gaps to fill. This report is showing a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of places that we can park ourselves, but there's a lot of areas we just aren't skilled enough in. There's a lot of things that we need to do to get ourselves ready for that. So going back to what I said before, we need to start. We should have started years ago, but we have a lot of businesses now that are on the way. But let's start making this happen as soon as we can.
Yeah, some really valid points there. All right, so we'll go to the next question. So this is, what has your experience been? And there'll be a individual question attached to that. So I'll start with Les. So Les, what are some of the challenges for conservation projects for the community? There are many mines on Nudgee country. What is your vision for restoring country? How do you think Nudgee people could be involved?
Well, conservation work is sustainable. Mining is not sustainable. That's the first up. And we still have decision making based on profit and gain, dollars. And even government leans towards that way. But in this age where we got 1.5 of that Paris Agreement, it's not profitable as far as the climate change agenda goes. It's not profitable to continue with this industry of mining as the number one. It might have been in the past, but that era is passing. We have to get smarter. How do we get back to 1.5? Otherwise, we all suffer, whether you black, white, or brindle, don't matter. So, and it don't matter what language you speak or what economic base you have. It's a time where we as a people need to pull together and get things happening fast. And right now, yeah, we're dealing with the mining industry. My experience has been living in mining region, goldfields of Western Australia. My experience says there are a lot of rogues in the mining industry, especially the little boys. They want to dodge responsibility. Big boys, they'll bring you to the table and work out something. But the little boys, little miners, junior miners, they seem to be our problem when it comes to damaging the land. I see that they, just go in and dig up a place and leave it wrecked, terrible. So some way we have to better our experience with mining, because right now it's still not working good, and it's promoted on TV right across Australia. It's a good thing to go in and dig land up, and that's got to change. My experience says that's got to change, because it takes us nowhere. It's not a sustainable practice.
Yeah, definitely. It's very valid. And there needs to be more work with partnerships, people working together, and understanding what that partnership should look like into the future, having sustainability. Derek, so you build a lot of relationships. What has changed over the last 10 to 20 years? You've a proven track record of taking up opportunities on offer in mining. So how do you see the opportunities for Indigenous businesses getting involved in rehabilitation activities?
I think the key thing that has changed is that we have seen a lot of growth in this area. I'd see the mining industry as the biggest economic driver for Aboriginal people in Australia. It drives our economic future for our country at the moment. That may not last forever and probably won't. It's how do we position ourselves in the mining industry and the mine closure component in order to move and transition through the different phases of economic development opportunities. And I feel the areas that we're lacking in is we don't have enough people that are skilled and ready for a lot of these works that are coming up. So talking about cradle to grave contracts, being involved in that, but having the training programs and getting involved in more in this automation. Automation is going to be affecting a lot of the the industry as we move forward, and particularly in the mine closure stuff as well. So there's a big gap in that training and space. But in my experience in rehabilitation over the years is I started out at Century Mine doing rehabilitation, and we were doing a lot of the civil works and capping the dumps and all that sort of stuff. But then it'd stop, and then it'd start. There'd be new owners come in. There'd be different approaches. It's just been quite ad hoc, and I've not seen really good examples of things that have occurred over the years. And I'm in the gas industry now, so there's ongoing rehabilitation work in that, and that seems to be successful, but it's still, there's a fair bit of ad hoc, and they don't want to put money into things that were done years ago. And I did a big approach to the federal to the state government about doing some of the work on the abandoned mines in Queensland, and made a big case for them that we really need to start projects about closing down and rehabilitating these mines. And I was told to pretty much go away, we don't have enough money. And that was many years ago. But my goal at the time was to use these places as training zones or areas where we could get people skilled up and ready to take on the bigger projects. And that's where I see a real opportunity. And in us targeting some of these smaller projects now, and then once these bigger projects come on board, then we're ready and able to take on some of these things on a bigger scale. But we're now seeing Aboriginal businesses. Back when I was 20 years ago, I was a lone ranger with a couple of others running around. But today we've got hundreds. We've got companies almost running their own mines at the moment. We've got companies floating on stock exchanges. All these things are going on. So we heard at our last conference that everyone in this room has the ability to shut down or close out a major mine in Australia or overseas because of the amount of skills and ability in the room. It's just us now having the opportunity and working together to achieve that, and building on that capacity that's currently existing. But yeah, that's my take on where we are today.
Thank you. John, what do your years of experience tell you when you hear the discussion about closure and rehabilitation opportunities that are clearly available? How do you get those contracts and the foot in the door?
I don't get too excited about where it goes. There's been a lot of hit and misses, and just got to be careful who you're going to work for in side of thing. You've got to do due diligence. People are notoriously going broke. And people their pockets. A lot of times we put in tenders, and a bit like Derek said, you want to create training grounds and create opportunities for. So I think that's the big problem is the lack of interest from the proponents to engage and to make sure that we can do these things. But at the end of the day, they want the cheapest, nastiest possible price they can seem to get for doing a bit of an ad hoc job. So and I guess the other part of the question is, how do we get it? Well, it's just the relationships we have. We've been building relationships for many, many years across many different sectors across Australia. And, you go to all these different things like the AAMI conference and whatnot, and you get to meet people, you get to know people, and you catch up. And I guess those relationships are very important. I guess it's probably not about having a foot in the door. It's what you've got to offer, and I think that's the important part. Just like I said before, not everyone wants it, and I think it's just that more education. And we could have all the experience, and as Derek said, there's untold amount of businesses out there that have got the experience all around Australia that can do these types of projects, but it's the appetite of the people that are holding the purse strings and what they want. And it's probably something that the federal government needs to to mandate, how this is to work on traditional country and make sure that the title holders are getting value out of what's happening. Some
Right.
rules around it.
Yeah. Thank you. Jai, what has your experience been? How do you think people in the community see mine closure?
Yeah, I think to Uncle Les's story, and there's many of those stories all over the country, it hasn't been overly positive. There's sort of people come in and there hasn't been a whole lot of focus or emphasis from what I can see on mine closure. It's the early stages, it's the exploration, it's the extraction, and then it's, in many instances, leaving these communities in a worse place than they came there, because there was a booming economy. There was, native title holders may have had royalties at a certain point, and then that tap turns off, and so it leaves them in a pretty tight predicament, and a pretty not a great experience, I think. So I think, to everyone's points earlier, I think, fortunately we are getting, the climate's dictating to us that we need to do something differently, and we need to listen to the country and listen to all the things that's happening around, and, from the net zero emissions stuff through to, ESG's front and center of everyone's mind at the moment, which is a good thing. And I think it's, a part of the AMI conference last year was a policy needs to follow too. Like the cultural heritage legislation was one of the key topics that was discussed last year at the AMI conference, and the relaxation of that, and putting us backwards again so that the policy is not always matching the the words on the pieces of paper. So I think that's something that's got to be looked at closely as well, to make sure that all of that legislation matches some of this stuff here as well. But and like we said, particularly from an Indigenous point of view, communities and country, we don't look at it as certain phases of the different types of the process of the mine. It's all part of more holistic approach around managing country. So I think the bigger part that native title holders and traditional owners have in terms of the whole process of the mine, not just bringing mob in at the last minute to say, okay, we've done this now, how do we restore and rehabilitate? It's about that joint ownership, and bringing Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous people at the forefront of even the planning phases of it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. There's a lot of truth telling I'm hearing, and opportunities for working together better, and enabling those gaps to be filled in the training space. Okay, so the next question. This question, how can the opportunities for Indigenous groups and businesses be taken up? And what do companies want from Indigenous businesses, and what is the strategy to be competitive? Start with John.
Yeah, I think a lot of the big guys out there, what they want from Indigenous businesses, do all the fluff stuff for them and make themselves feel good. There are some that are doing a great job, but yeah, a lot more work needs to about being competitive. Sometimes you've got to look at apples for apples, and sometimes we're on the opposites of what we're pricing, because you've got the cheap and nasties, and then you've got businesses like Aboriginal businesses that want to do really well and get the best outcomes for mob. The opportunities for Indigenous groups is massive. Derek touched on it before, that the massive areas inside Australia. But until there's some really I don't think a lot's going to change, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we lost you a little bit there, broken up a little bit. Thank you, John. We'll go to Derek.
Yeah, the key things that I can see that needs to needs to change is we need to see more government mining companies and governments thinking about procurement strategies early and identifying the businesses and the opportunities early enough so that we can start to map this out before it starts. I think all businesses want the quality, the quantity, they want safety, they want the price. And I think that's important that Aboriginal businesses are achieving today. It's not just a handout mentality anymore. There are some that probably fit that mentality, but there's a movement more towards that the middle of the road where businesses need to be. I think a lot of our businesses go in with a deficit mentality, and I think a lot of them need to stand proud and work hard as we have as business owners to make the most of these opportunities. I feel there's some real opportunities in the repurposing of these areas. There's a lot of infrastructure that's going into these places. I remember at Century they were talking about moving it all out, and it just didn't make sense to me. It's a beautiful part of the country. You've got Lawn Hill Gorge sitting on your back door. There was a real opportunity to turn that into a tourism project or something else. It had a great airport, had all of these things that had power. So I think there's so many opportunities there. It's really about us identifying where are the areas we really want to park ourselves. And I think there is this mentality that goes around is, oh, let's put it's almost like we call it the crumbs approach in the industry. Let's give these fellas the crumbs and that'll shut them up for a while. And I think in some ways I see this gathering seeds and talking about country is important, but it's also, we don't want to get caught up into this mentality that that's the only place these guys fit. That's the only place that we see benefit in them. And that to me is just given the tobacco and the honey to these guys and send them on their way. And this is where this whole thing needs to change its attitude towards Aboriginal businesses and the way they think about us in terms of we are sitting at the top of the chain. We can sit at the bottom of the chain. We can sit in the middle of the chain, but we want to be able to see those opportunities early, and we want to be a part of those opportunities early, and we want to build towards that and make sure that we're a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with those nuggets of insight. We'll go to Les next.
Yeah, okay. Businesses. I see some Indigenous mining companies in place. They're picking up the different contracts, like the haulage and the grizzly is. They've sort of got a few companies that are involved. Not every Aboriginal wants to become a miner, so business opportunity is okay for those who want to become a miner. And I think mining companies and government should give assistance, and especially in that administrative side of things, of how the company can make the pathway more level, I guess, getting into the business. I think once the partnership's set with the company, then the mining company sort of makes it a lot more easier, where contractors sort of have to take Indigenous groups along, because it's Indigenous groups' land where this resource is coming out of. And so when a mining company says, if you're going to take this contract, you're going to take the Indigenous business along with you for the applicants, the Indigenous applicants, businesses. And that worked in our case, in a lot of cases. But I think there's something wrong, because sometimes it's the lowest bid, and the lowest bid always, you don't break even with your profits and stuff with the company for your own business. And so you're left eating a meat pie instead of lobsters or something. It's still how you measure the money and stuff, and that's not a great skill Indigenous people have got. But we certainly look to partners with that skill to help us into that space. Businesses, rehab and that sort of stuff we've seen happen around the mining camp, protecting it from fire and the bush, and that worked. As long as the company was keen enough to, I guess, pay the price. And at least then you get the, pay peanuts, you get monkeys. If you're gonna go and assist the company, Indigenous company, a lot more with a genuine partnership, and then you're gonna get a real company that's in the land. You don't have to bring in from out of the region. It's always there every day for the whole duration of the mine. So yeah, it's a balance between what are the assistance that Indigenous businesses need, but also being rewarded with that long-term employment of locals, and they're around all the time. You don't have to keep re-engaging new workers from outside the region. And the businesses that run locally will always have somebody locally on standby. So it's opportunities are there, but it all comes back to the mining company wanting to genuinely work in partnership with the Indigenous business.
Thanks for that, Liz. So moving to the next question. So what do you see are the opportunities for ranger and conservation connection? Are there other concerns to be addressed? That kind of leads on from the previous question about businesses. So are there any concerns to be addressed first? You raised open, genuine partnerships, Liz. So do you want to continue on with answering this question?
Absolutely. The Indigenous Ranger program, it has a lot of Indigenous people working on it. It's well funded. It's supported by all camps in Parliament, so it's bipartisan. It's something that works with Indigenous people because it's about identity. It's about good health, walking around the bush. It's a holistic program that a lot of people enjoy. And so using that program, you already got the success of the program built together as a business. And these rangers have been used to go in and protect the mine camp from fire, go in and take out the fuel loads. A lot of the and that's outdoor work. That's exactly what Indigenous people are wired for. And it's good pay too, because it's contractual mining work. It's good pay. And the Indigenous Ranger program we have in Australia is the best on earth. It's a role model for climate change globally. And we need a lot more support for the Ranger program to be extended in a large way. It's working in Norseman at the moment. We're doing a transition where we're handing the Ranger program over to the native title group, who holds all the tenure anyway for the land. and any work upon the land. But yeah, we've hit some huge successes, and that's something that really needs to be, I guess, we've got a lot of people doing research. That program, the Indigenous Ranger program, has to be researched and proven and shown to the world that it is the best Indigenous program there is. Because it extends right out from the bush, walking boots on ground. Then there's the drone, and there's the aeroplane, helicopters, and then there's the space station. We use all of them. GPSing. And so it's not just sitting down in the bush, lighting a fire, carving some boomerangs and that anymore. We've got high-powered rifles and Toyotas that are built for long bush rides. The opportunities are there for rangers to do mining contracts, yes, but the conservation element is what's important the most, because we've been the land managers of the greatest estate on earth, and we're continuing that. And yeah, we just need Australia to wake up to the Indigenous Ranger program.
Great. We'll go to John. John, with this question, in terms of mine closure opportunities, including the ranger and conservation connection, do you want to elaborate a little bit what you know on there?
Yeah, pardon me, I see it just as a great opportunity. I mean, if every native title holder has a ranger program, all over it, knows what's going on, getting a lot of extra training and providing community with that pathway into it. And I think also together with the range program, which makes good sense. And I see the connection is, it's really a no-brainer. Some of the stuff that I've been involved in down in South Australia with the ranger programs down to Coorong and things like that, there's a lot of those guys that transition into the ranger program into our workforce, and some want to go back to the ranger program. So, which is great, because people get so much out of working on their own country. It is, I think, it's so underestimated what that means to, and the community.
Great. Derek.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect synergy where mining companies have gone in and destroyed land. We need the people there to manage the land after that as well, and manage the land as we have done for a lot of years. I note when we had our contracts, or we have our contracts at the moment, we have a cultural heritage managers. So our guys go out and identify cultural heritage and make sure that's not destroyed during any development work. So they're feeling the feelings that they have, and the teamwork and the camaraderie that occurs within that space is so much stronger because of that feeling that they're protecting country and protecting their culture. And rangers are in the same position. They're protecting. They're the servants for the country. And I see that there's that perfect connection there. And what I do note from our experiences is that when you've got someone protecting your country, and you've got a blackfella on a machine, or you've got a blackfella sitting in the office, and you've got them at all these different places within the operation, it brings a full connection together. It's the perfect story for where we want to go. We don't want to be pigeonholed to just being rangers. We don't want to be pigeonholed to being operators, but we want that holistic approach. We want to be part of all of those aspects of making this work.
Great. And we'll go to Jai next.
Yeah, I think we've seen the successes of ranger programs around the country. I think the risk of it is that it is subject to the funding of the government of the day, and we've seen what happens when they pull that funding, and then what happens, as a result of that in terms of all that stuff, which I think is something we need to figure out to talk about what's the sustainability of ranger programs. And I think a part of that is rescoping what we think rangers are. Like, if you look at the current programs, it can be quite minimal in scope of managing trails and that sort of thing. Whereas, when we think of rangers as blackfellas, it's protecting and managing country across the board, from the land to the sea to, as Uncle mentioned there, right up to the space. So I think there's an opportunity for the conservation piece and the mining companies to actually contribute to funding that as part of their cultural heritage plans, so that there is a sustainable ranger type program for future years to come.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We've got the final question now before we head to the audience for their questions. So this is to set the stage for the next webinars. What do you think are the critical issues that need to be discussed? Reflect a little bit on the role Indigenous businesses in enabling Indigenous-led participation in caring for country. Reflect on synergies and disconnects with Indigenous Ranger programs and the opportunities and challenges for traditional owner groups and identifying opportunities and engaging with industry. So first we'll go to John.
Yeah, I think the next one, I think Lee said, the mines department, it'd be good to get a few of these other people involved in these webinars that we can pitch some questions to and answer to the broader audience. I think that'll be really valuable. Yeah, I think sort of the critical issues.
What would you like to hear in future webinars? I think we've lost you a little bit, so we'll come back. We'll go to Derek next.
Yeah, so the key things for me for future webinars and moving forward, I suppose, is some of the key things that I haven't really touched on is would be good to see more case examples of where this has been successful. I know when I went overseas and saw the Canadian experience many years ago, it changed the way I thought as an Aboriginal business owner, and it changed the way I dreamt about my vision in terms of where I was going, because I saw what was going on in a different country and I saw that the same issues were happening there as they were here. And that gave me the drive and the direction. So I think if we could see the same thing happening in the mine closure space, where we could see some really good examples of this working and Aboriginal people involved, then we could see the dream ourselves, and that can be hard to fathom without seeing it sometimes. I think that we need more representation in those peak bodies that are part of this process in government and also those industry bodies, and we're having a seat at those tables. I would like to see a bit more work being done in the training space right now, because there's some real technical areas in this space that needs to be addressed, and I'd like to see a bit more happening in that automation and the training around the technical and the scientific stuff that needs to occur. Because like I said before, I don't just want us to be pigeonholed to one area. I want us to be able to have opportunities in whatever area we want to choose. So they're the key things for me. And yeah, thank you.
It's funny that you mentioned the Canadian experience, because that's something we're looking at doing in our fourth webinar, which there'll be more information coming out about that soon. Okay, so we'll go to Jai next.
Yeah, I think some of the critical sort of issues is historically been just the power imbalance between, Aboriginal people and landowners and native title owners or traditional owners, whatever you want to put the label on is and these companies. And I think, you know, that's something that, you know, probably some of the key levers to push there are the tools of, you know, legislation and policy. And once we start to see those sort of changes, we've seen, you know, the benefits of it when it's really good, and the deficits of it when they loosen it for, you know, for profits or whatever else. But I think that's sort of something, because I think the future vision should be, you know, as Amy's vision is for, you know, Indigenous businesses to have true market share of this sector, and that will only benefit Indigenous businesses, but it'll actually benefit everyone. It'll benefit, you know, we're all, to some degree, we live on this country, so we're all custodians to some degree of this country, whether it be traditional custodians or custodians that are of more recent arrivals. So we've all got an obligation to care for this country and to make sure that it's there for future generations. So you know, I think, and legislation and policy, I think, is a great tool for that. So it'd be good to understand, you know, what the sort of future trends and how we start to leverage some of that, and yeah, hear from, as Derek said, some sort of people and sites and projects that are actually, you know, we can see it, and we can hear from those that are actually have been successful in doing so.
Great. And Les, would you like to add to the discussion?
Yes. I'm just thinking with the Ranger program, that's the WA one, because you got both state and federal Ranger programs. I think the WA one in our state is too much red tape, and we've lost genuine Ranger programs because of that fact that it's got, if not triple, more than that, than what the feds want for your accounting for the Ranger program. And I think that's madness, because that's shutting genuine Ranger programs down. That's a critical point in Western Australia, that the government changed their policy on how much reporting has to be done within the Western Australian Ranger program. We had we turned our Western Australian government Ranger program into a women's program. And unfortunately, that could only last till the following year, because it just was too much to manage. That's one point. This year, the budget has included the Ranger program, so that's good from the government point of view. That it's investing in a genuine, real boost for not only the local Indigenous peoples of the land, but Australia and the global community, if we invest a lot more to go out further. Government, this third point is government should double the Ranger program annually, or I mean, every time they do a budget or whatever, so that, yeah, this program becomes genuine, because it's got all the ticks, it ticks all the boxes. And there's no reason why the government shouldn't back it. And not just in crumbs and just a little bit at a time to keep the dogs at bay, but genuinely double the program, double both Ranger numbers and the Indigenous Protected Area program. So that way, there'll be a boost to Australia. You got boots on the ground in the outback, where our border security never goes, but we've got our Indigenous Rangers out there keeping that. They were the ones who found those boat people that come in off the north coast. So we have to, invest in something that's genuine, and it'll close the gap with what's happening with Indigenous issues. So that's the critical areas that funding must be injected into the Indigenous Ranger program, and that government support the administration, our administrations of those programs, so that we don't get top heavy. Yeah, that's me.
Great. Thank you. And you'll be pleased to know that we're looking at bringing that discussion about ranger programs back to some of our future webinars. You might hear a bit more about that from Roger at the end. Okay, so that's the end of those questions. Thank you very much for your valuable contributions. Now we'll go to the audience. I'm just going to stop sharing. We'll go to the audience for their questions. I'd ask that you raise your hand and then you can ask directly to a particular speaker, or if you would like to have the whole panel answer your question. But just please be mindful to give everyone an opportunity, just one question at a time. Yes, so who have we got? Anybody raising their hand? I can't see. Fiona. Who would you like to ask your question to? We can't hear you, Fiona. Does anybody else want to ask a question?
The word is that people need to be unmuted.
Yes.
Okay, so now I've got, sorry, I've been unmuted. Sorry, Caroline, and sorry, presenters. I'd just like to know what is considered a successful ranger program, and does using the ranger program experience as a launch pad for other, I guess, employment opportunities, is that considered a success, or is that undermining the ranger program?
Fiona, who was your question aimed at?
The panel, no one in particular.
Okay, anyone want to start? Derek, would you like to respond?
I could respond to parts of this. It's probably a very big question in what's a successful ranger program, because there's so many parts to it. But I think success comes in that the broader sense of caring for country and having a program that allows those people to step up and have the ongoing funding to be able to do their work. And I think, as Jai said before, the hardest thing for these things to do is get ongoing funding and to continue them along. I from Stradbroke Island, we have a quite a successful ranger program over there, and the pride and to see the young people get opportunities in that space has been enormous. And I've seen a number of my workers go from working out in a rostered type situation to heading back home and becoming a ranger. And it's like they've done a full circle. They've gone out, earned the big dollars, and they've gone back and now looking after country. So I think it's a real mindset. It's a real feeling of what is the perfect job for me. And I feel a lot of the time these guys feel that when given the right opportunity. I do think it is a good stepping stone project as well. It is good to have, and we always try and have these in our operation where there is a base area for people to begin, and that's a really good spot to begin a job. And as we did at Sentry, as I do with my cultural heritage team now, we have a lot of traditional owners that come through who are working on their cultural heritage protection, but then they we give them the opportunity to step up or to stay where they are. So it's about putting in place plans, and we have these workplace plans with these guys, and we say, where do you want to go? Do you want to stay here? Do you want to do other things? So we try and find the opportunities and the training to find them the direction that they want to be in life. But they definitely I feel there's a fair bit of comfortableness when they're looking after their country.
Les, would you like to respond to Fiona's question?
Yeah, a successful ranger program is, in our case, we protected old growth woodlands. Nobody else is doing it on this earth, but we're doing it in our region. And yeah, we're measuring how large that space is, and we put fire around the outside of it so it doesn't, bushfires don't creep into it and take the old growth woodland out. The old growth woodlands, something you can't replace with at any level. And there's also awards, rangers, actually guest speaking like ourselves right now. We're talking. This is only because a successful ranger program has brought me here to this chair to speak to you. And those things I can share about the successful ranger program is that we go and talk to World Heritage, is it Cosmo or Costco? We got invited to go and speak to them about our heritage with the paintings on the wall and the different rock formations. And so we share that with a global community. So we're not just the ranger program down in the back blocks of Australia. We're a ranger program that's sharing our knowledge base globally. We're protecting land space, trees and that can never return after a bushfire. We're seeing rangers be in the ranger position for about a year, maybe two, and they go off into full-time employment in the mining industry. They're buying cars, hire purchase cars. They're buying houses. They're getting on with life. That's what you call a successful ranger program. It creates well-being and a sense, the sense of going into another level in life, not just. And these people I'm talking about, the doctor said to me once, Les, whatever you're doing down there at the ranger base, keep doing it. Because a lot of my patients who come here, I'm either sending them off to the mental health ward, or I have to put them in here for a few nights to steady them down. They suffer with mental health, alcohol and drugs and stuff, and they're on your team. So he said, just keep doing that. And the same with the police sergeant. Police sergeant made the comment, he said, listen, whatever you're doing, same thing. You just keep doing, because we're not getting, those boys down there are not coming through our systems anymore. They're there at your base and they're working. We can see that. And even the principal commented about our Indigenous Ranger program and said, look, we're just happy that you're doing what you're doing, because kids are at school and the punctuality is a lot more better now. And the kids are aspiring to become rangers. There's nothing like that ever before in the history of Norsemen. And so we're just very happy that the program's in place. So there's some examples of what a successful ranger program is.
Great. Does anyone else want to add to that? We've got about 8 minutes left before we'll do up our final closure.
Well, Caroline, I was just going to add, I think, to Uncle Les and Derek's point, I think the success of ranger programs are ultimately determined by the people in the communities, because I think the environment's so different, the the needs are so different, the priorities are so different, and I think that's where, I think potentially some things can go wrong, because the success and the KPIs are determined the other way around, and then have to get a report on, which I think Uncle Les touched on earlier, around the red tape involved in all of that, reporting on someone else's KPIs or success factors is problematic. And that's, yeah, in an ideal world, there's a community that determines the success, and yeah, there needs to be reporting frameworks in place to justify the money, and government money and taxpayers' dollars and whatnot. But it can be done in a way that's yeah, less bureaucratic and red tape, I think, to win for everyone.
Great. Right. There's a question in the chat. Joe Hayes has put, how do we get all parties, mining and traditional owners, to genuinely prioritise closure? Do you want to start with that, Les?
Look, we have to encourage mining companies to build a better relationship with Indigenous populations wherever they're mining. So that relationship stuff will help harden the issues and at least get us halfway there to the point, because that's basically that holds up most of the train. If there's no relationship, then it's not going to be moving. So, and yeah, any skills base that's lacking, it'll be good to the mining companies and whoever else can come in to help with that, because we certainly got the people on the ground and some systems, but there's sometimes a lack of skills. And I'm talking about up in the administrative area. And that's quite common in the outback, that our people who do know our administration side of things, they usually go off into the cities and that. And so we're left with community that's, strong on vision and hope that a mining company can partner in, and we get to the end of the big cleanup.
Yeah, definitely a good point you're making with regards to the partnerships. And like you said before, the partnership has to start at the beginning stage. No use coming in at the end and saying we want to create this partnership now. It has, so that there is that prioritization of closure, it has to start at the very beginning when plans are being developed. Did anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about respect of the actual component of the project. I think there is a lot of, because mining itself is all about production and meeting targets and about the extraction side of it. And Aboriginal people are seen as that as well. They're seen as a bit of a burden a lot of the times, and it's about how do you educate and get mining companies to start to see mine closure and Aboriginal people as part of their future and as part of their thinking about the positivity of this stuff, rather than seeing it as a negative to their operations. So I think there's a lot of cultural awareness. There's a lot of work that needs to be done around mine closure and the importance of it, and getting it back to, and getting these miners to start to respect country instead of seeing it as a resource that they need to rape and pillage. I think there's a big disconnect still there, and that there still needs to be a lot of work that needs to occur there.
Yeah, Carol, I think the quickest way is through, like anything, if you want something to go from a nice to have to a must do, legislation policies, the quickest way to make that happen. But then there's also the other side of it, of, as Derek was saying, the education piece around why it's actually important, and like if and the importance of industry bodies, like not tooting our own horn, but Amy's got a lot of knowledge, and 150 odd Indigenous businesses plus native title holders and traditional owners that we're able to take on that information and advocate on behalf of them to these mining companies, because I think that can be problematic at times. You've got native title holders, or you've got single Indigenous businesses trying to advocate against these big powerhouses, and They could have their contracts pulled, or they could, so having those advocacy bodies that have the knowledge base there, I think, is important to bring that education piece along to the sector.
Mhm. We've got time for probably one more question. I'm just reading from the chat. This one is directed to Les. In long-term post-closure management of sites following relinquishment is an often ignored aspect of mine closure. So management through ranger programs to maintain these sites seems an obvious solution for many mining districts. Could legacy funds for mining companies similar to the Mining Rehab Fund be an effective way to fund these and address the legacy risk associated with mining and providing long-term sustainable funding for ranger groups? Quite a long question. Les, do you want to have a go at that one?
Look, there's always opportunity, I guess, to get these ideas actioning with boots on the ground. It does come back to the dollar. The mining sector will always scream poor. That's what we found quite often. But yeah, the best solution is Indigenous Ranger groups. However, Indigenous Ranger groups, if there's a huge conservation value in the landscape, that's where a lot of their time is going to be focused. So they won't always be available unless it's booked in as a contractual short-term work. And yeah, Indigenous people, we don't like the thought of all our rangers just going in working for a mining company, totally. So that's the other thing, value system, that whether it works or not for us. And yeah, we believe with good yarning and partnering, we could work a solution how it could best work between both groups, not just we just listening to the mining, but we got to listen to us too, and our community and our land and our spirit.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So we've reached the end of our session right on time. Now we'll hand over to Roger to give a quick summary of what was discussed and information about the next webinar. Roger.
Thanks, Carolyn. That's a challenge, isn't it? What a great session. What a great panel. Can I just thank you so much for you hearing. I've learned so much and hearing your insights across this seminar, and Dominic too, because what he's laid out is the opportunity. $5 billion a year. 10% of that would be as much as what Rio Tinto Iron Ore is contracting to Indigenous businesses in Western Australia, for instance. So the scale, the opportunities there. To be fair, the insights we got to see that the impression of the industry needs to lift its game in terms of how it operates and how it's viewed by Aboriginal people. This is the view of the panel, that there's more work that the industry can do to be seen as a positive thing, and there's a qualification around not everyone wanting to work in the industry, and an emphasis on conversation being sustainable. But we did hear the enormous gains over the last 20 years from Derek being the Lone Ranger 20 years ago, and now honestly, the mining presents some of the biggest economic driver for Aboriginal people and huge advantage. But the holistic themes are coming through strongly. I think the opportunities are across the entire mine life cycle. So closure is not. We're not talking about hiving off closure as a separate domain, but it needs. To get to that closure space, you need to be talking to people at the beginning at the project and build those relationships. And how Les was saying, the relationships is underpins everything. But that idea of engaging Indigenous people across the whole life cycle is an important takeaway at this, part of the summary. A room for government in terms of how they can help lift the profile of the industry, and also supporting that idea that if you look holistically and you can see, that there's work to be done. Well, what about the training and setting up models like Derek was saying, starting small on abandoned mines? I mean, what a great suggestion. There's something that's got to be taken up somehow. And the meshing within ranger groups was really valuable discussion. We'll be talking specifically about ranger groups at the further subsequent webinars, but that how success and how that success is measured in terms of the managing the country, at the community level with police, schools, health department saying keep this going, but also the individual level, so people can pass from ranger groups, step out from ranger groups into structured jobs in the industry and coming back again. So that interface allows people to make choices about where they fit in that bigger picture. So lots to take in, and lots of messages there for the industry about being positive towards this opportunity. It's not just about Indigenous people taking up opportunity, but the industry itself needs to start to see the opportunity and work in a holistic way across the mining life cycle and across the different domains. So we heard also that Indigenous people don't want to be, how do you say it, to put into, pigeonholed, and their skills, and they can develop skills to be part of the land use transitions, the rehabilitations, the other opportunities in terms of resource recovery, as well as the engagement. So thank you very much, and please keep track of the advertisements for the next webinars. CRC Time has newsletters, and we'll be sending out email notices for the next webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Rogers. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. Thank you for our panelists, really valuable contributions. And yeah, that's the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.